In this tutorial, we're going to look at the meaning of percentages, and then we're going to do calculations involving percentages. And before we finish, we'll look at how to use the percentage button on your calculator. Now, percentages are very familiar to us. We see them in the media an awful lot, whether they're talking about the percentage of A's to C's gained by youngsters in exams, or whether they're talking about the success of the latest medical procedures. In addition, any of those of you who work, you'll pay income tax, and income tax is based on a percentage of your salary. Your national insurance contribution is a percentage of your salary. In addition to that, when we go shopping, most of the goods that we buy have got VAT, value added tax, added on at a rate of 17.5%. So percentages are all around us, they're part of our life. So what does percentage actually mean? Well, in mathematics, our symbol that we use is the percent sign, and it means out of 100. Or as a mathematical process, our out of means divide by 100. So let's have a look at an example. Let's say you get 85% in a test. That means you've got 85 marks out of a possible 100 marks. Let's look at some familiar percentages. 75%. That means 75 out of 100. Or if we write the fraction in its lowest form, it's 3/4. Or if we write it as a decimal, 0.75. 50%. That's 50 out of 100. In its lowest form, that's exactly the same as a half. And as our decimal, 0.5. 25% is 25 out of 100. In its lowest form, that's a quarter, or 0.25 as a decimal. Let's look at 10%. That's a very common one. That's 10 out of 100, or 1/10 as a fraction in its lowest form, or 0.1 as our decimal. And 5%. That's just 5 out of 100. And in its lowest form, that's 1/20th and 0.05 as a decimal. Now, it's worth noting here that to find 50%, an easy way of doing it is just to find half of the number or divide by 2. And to find 10%, another common one, you just divide by 10, finding 1/10 of the number. Let's look at writing a fraction as a percentage. Let's say we get 18 marks out of 20 in a test, and we want to write that as a percentage. First of all, we write it as a fraction, 18 out of 20. Now, a percentage is out of 100, so we want this number at the bottom, the denominator, to be 100. Well, 20 multiplied by 5 gives us 100. So in this case, we can just multiply 18 by 5, which gives us 90 out of 100. So 18 out of 20 is the same as 90%. Now, that's fine when it's an easy number that we've got our marks out of. 20 I could easily change into 100. I know to multiply by 5. But what happens if it's not quite such a nice number? Well, let's have a look. Let's take the example, this time let's say we have 53 marks. And this time let's have it out of 68. Well, we write it as a fraction again, 53 out of 68. And what we're going to do here, we multiplied by 5 and we multiplied the denominator by 5. So both numerator and denominator were multiplied by 5. Well, this time we're going to multiply both by 100. Now this 100 here gives us our percentage, because percentage is divide by 100. So we're actually going to calculate 53 divided by 68, multiply it by 100, and that will give us our percentage. And if we carry out that calculation, we find that it comes to 77.94%, that's to 2 decimal places, or if we put it to the nearest percent, 78%. Let's look at an example now where we're finding the percentage of a quantity. Now, in many countries, it's customary to leave a 10% tip when you have a meal. So let's say our meal costs £25.40 and we want to leave a 10% tip. Now, we want 10% of £25.40. So in mathematical language, 10% is 10 divided by 100. Of is multiply, £25.40. And that equals £2.54. So that's the tip that we would leave. Now 10%, I said earlier, that was an easy one to calculate because you just divide by 10. But the method that I've shown here is what you would use for more complex percentages. Let's have a look at another one. Let's say we have a salesman who earns 2% commission on orders that he gets in 1 month. And let's say he has orders to the value of £250,000. How much is he going to earn? Well, we want 2% of £250,000. Again, turn to our mathematical language. 2% is 2 divided by 100 of multiply £250,000. Now in this one we can do some cancelling because 100 goes into £250,000. So we've got twice 2,500, giving us an answer of £5,000. Now, VAT, value added tax, 17.5% at the moment. So let's do some calculations where we need to add on VAT. Let's say a computer costs £634 plus VAT. Now, we can look at this in the same way as we did these examples. We can find 17.5% of £634. That's the VAT, and we can add it on. Well, let's do that. So 17.5% of £634 is 17.5. I'm going to write it as 0.5 when I now turn it into our fraction with our percent of £634. And that works out to be £110.95. So if we want the total cost of the computer, we would need to add that on to our £634 plus our £110.95, giving us a total of £744.95. Now, if we'd wanted that total cost, rather than perhaps what the VAT amount was, we could have looked at it in a slightly different way. We wanted 17.5% and we wanted the original 100%, the computer plus the VAT. So what we could have found is 117.5% of £634. So we could have done 117.5 divided by 100 times by 634, done that calculation directly in our calculator and come out with our answer of £744.95. So it depends what information you're looking for, whether you wanted the split with the VAT or whether you just wanted the total price. All as we did here was add the percentages first before finding the percentage of the £634. Now, there's another nice way of working out VAT, and we'll have a look at that because you don't need a calculator. You can work it out when you're in the middle of the shop, wherever you are. It's a good way. So let's just look at our 17.5%. And let's take the same example again, the £634. Well, 10%. Let's work that out first. That's a nice, easy one. We just divide by 10. So that gives us £63.40. 5% is half of our 10%. So that's half of £63.40. Well, half of 60 is 30. Half of 3 is £1.50. So that's £31.50 plus the 20. So that's £31.70. Now, 2.5% is half of 5%. So if we find half of £31.70, well, that's £15.50 plus 35, so that's £15.85. 10%, add 5%, add 2.5%, gives us our 17.5%. So if we add these up, we get 5, 8, 7, 15, 19, carry the 1, 5, 6, 7, gives us 3, 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and there's our £110.95. Now let's look at where we're taking a percentage off. So far we've been adding percentages on. Let's say we have a pair of trainers in a shop, and the cost of those trainers is £75, and there's a 10% discount. So we want 10% of £75, that will be the discount. So that's 10 divided by 100 times 75. I'm writing it the longhand way, but since it's 10%, I can just divide by 10 and my answer would be £7.50. Of course, I then need to do the subtraction. So it'll be 75, take away the £7.50, giving me £67.50 for the actual cost of the trainers. Let's look at that the other way. As we did with the adding on ones, we looked at it two ways of saying, well, it's a 10% discount. So the £75 is 100%. And we actually want 100 take away 10%. So we could work it out as being 90% of £75, where we do 90 divided by 100 times 75, so that we could directly come out with our answer of £67.50. Again, it really depends whether you're interested in knowing what the discount is or whether you want the final amount and what the numbers are. This was very easy actually to do in my head, to find 10% and take it away, and that's easier than actually working out the 90% in my head. So it depends on the context of your question and the numbers involved. Let's look at a slightly different situation now, where the price includes VAT, and we want to work out what the price was before VAT. Let's say we've got our computer again, but this time it costs £699, including VAT. Now, a common misconception is to find 17.5% of £699 and take it off. That's incorrect, because what you're doing there is finding 17.5% of a number that is larger than the actual price that the 17.5% would have been calculated on. So don't just find 17.5% of that number. If VAT is included, we need to look at it in a different way. And what we say is, well, that £699 actually represents 117.5%. The 100% of the cost of the computer plus the 17.5% VAT. So if I want to find out what it costs without the VAT, what I want is the 100%. So what we do, very simply, is we divide by 117.5. I'll put it as 0.5 because I'm using a fraction. And what we have on this side, if we divide 117.5 by 117.5, is 1. So we calculate what 1% is. And having got our 1%, we can then very easily multiply by 100 to find the 100%, so the cost before VAT. Or if we'd wanted the VAT, we could have just multiplied by 17.5 to find just the VAT element. So the net cost is going to be 699 divided by 117.5 times 100. Let's just write the net cost. And when we calculate that, we get £594.89, and that's to the nearest penny. Okay, let's look at another example. This time we've got an insurance company charging a customer £320 for his car insurance. Now, this includes the government's insurance premium tax of 5%. So we want to calculate what the cost of the car insurance is before that 5%'s been added on. Well, our £320 represents the 100% of the cost of the insurance plus the 5% of the premium tax. So that's 105%. So as before, we take our £320, we divide it by 105 to get 1%. So the car insurance before the tax has been added is going to be our £320 divided by 105 multiplied by 100. And when we calculate that, we come up with £304.76. Let's look at another similar example, but this time a reduction in costs. Let's say a coat is reduced in a sale. And it's reduced by 15%. And the new cost is £127.50. And we want to calculate what the original cost was. So our £127.50, what does that represent? Well, it's the original 100% minus the 15%. So it's equal to 85%. We want to calculate what the 100% was, the original amount. So if we take the £127.50, divide it by 85, that tells us what 1% is. And then all as we have to do to find the original cost is to multiply our 1% by 100. So £127.50 divided by 85 times 100. And if you work that out, we come up with £150. Now, another percentage that we might want to calculate is a percentage decrease or a percentage increase. And we've got a rule for this. So a percentage increase or decrease. And to calculate it, what we do is we find the actual increase or decrease, and we divide it by the original amount. And then we multiply by 100%. So we find the actual increase or decrease, divide by the original amount, and multiply by 100%. Let's have a look at some examples and put it into context. Let's say a couple paid £180,000 for their house, and 4 years later it was valued at £350,000. What's the percentage increase in value of that house? Right, so we want percentage increase. It's equal to the actual increase. So that's £350,000. Take away £180,000. That's the actual increase in value. Divided by the original amount. Well, originally it cost them £180,000. We multiply by 100%. 350 take away 180,000 is £170,000 divided by £180,000 times 100%. And when you calculate that, you find that to the nearest percentage, that's a 94% increase in that value. Let's have a look at a decrease now. Let's suppose you paid £12,000 for a car, and 3 years later it was only worth £8,000. What was the percentage decrease in the value of that car? So percentage decrease is equal to the actual decrease. So that's our £12,000 take away our £8,000 divided by the original amount. The original value of the car was £12,000. And we multiplied by 100%. So that's £4,000 divided by £12,000 times 100%. And that gives us 33% to the nearest 1%. Let's have a look now at using the percentage button on your calculator. Now, it very much depends when you press the percentage button in your calculation as to what effect this has on your answer. And I think the easiest way is if we have a look at some various calculations. So if I do it in a chart with the buttons pressed, that's what we're actually going to press on the calculator. The answer that's displayed, the effect that that's actually had, so what it's done, and what that actually means in terms of the calculation. So let's look at if we press 48 divided by 400 and then the percent button. Well, the answer that's displayed is 12. So pressing that percent button has had the effect of multiplying by 100. Well, what does that mean in terms of our question? Well, what we've done is found 48 as a percentage of 400. Let's look at another example. This time, if we do 1 divided by 2 and multiply by 300 and then press the percent button. The answer that comes up is 1.5. And the effect that this has had is to divide by 100. And what we've done is we've found 300% of a half. Let's try this one. 400 multiplied by 50 and then the percent button. The answer we get is 200. So this has had the effect of dividing by 100. And what we've done is found 50% of 400. Now, this is a common sort of question, 50% of 400. I know that's dead easy and you can do it in your head, but let's consider what happens if we actually put that into the calculator. So if we do 50, press the percent button and multiply by 400. Well, what's displayed, and although I've written answer, it's actually what's displayed, is 400 because we've not pressed any equals. So it's actually not calculating anything. It's had no effect and there's been no calculation. This percentage hasn't done anything. 50% times 400, you've just got that 400 in the display still. So if we actually now press the equals button, afterwards, what happens? Well, the answer we get then is 20,000. Now again, pressing that percent button has had no effect, because what's happened is we've just done 50 times 400, and that's the meaning that we've got there. So by all means use the percent button on your calculator, but be aware of what it's actually doing to the calculation, depending on when you press it as to what effect it has.